Thank you for taking 10 minutes to get up to speed on world events. I'm Carl Azus for CNN 10. Dozens of people have been arrested at the border between the U.S. and Mexico after tensions flared earlier this week at the San Ysidro port of entry. This is one of the busiest border crossings in the world. It's located between Southern California and Tijuana, a city in northwest Mexico. And U.S. officials estimate that about 100,000 people legally cross that border every day. But they temporarily closed the crossing on Sunday after hundreds of people on the Mexican side ran past police blockades and tried to get into the U.S. illegally. They're some of the members of the migrant caravan we've reported on this fall. It's made up of thousands of people, mostly from Central America, who've been traveling through Mexico in the hopes of gaining entry to the U.S. Sunday's incident began with what was supposed to be a peaceful march to the border, but a number of protesters broke off in different directions once they got close to it. And when they were stopped, the U.S. Customs and Border Protection Agency says some of the migrants started throwing rocks. In response, CBP says it used tear gas to disperse the protesters. A CBP official says it doesn't look like any of the protesters made it into the U.S. illegally, though 69 people were arrested on the U.S. side of the border. Rafael Romo tells us how many were arrested on the Mexican side and what's likely to happen to them.
It all started with a peaceful demonstration, but it quickly turned into a chaotic scene when a group of immigrants overwhelmed Mexican federal police and rushed toward the border. The police had been blocking access to the American side, but it was impossible for a few dozen officers to stop the flow of hundreds of people. The crowd included not only men, but also women and children, according to journalists who witnessed the scene. The melee left what is known as the busiest land port of entry in the Western Hemisphere quiet for several hours as Customs and Border Protection authorities temporarily closed off vehicle and pedestrian traffic at San Ysidro. By Sunday afternoon, CBP reopened crossing lanes in both directions to pedestrians. On the Mexican side, Tijuana police said 39 people were detained in connection with the attempt to rush the border. Those detained, police said, will be deported to their countries of origin in Central America. Earlier Sunday, Mexico's Interior Ministry said it had stopped nearly 500 migrants who tried to enter the U.S. illegally and that those who could be identified as having participated would be deported. Rafael Romo, CNN, Atlanta.
Finally, some good news to tell you about concerning California's devastating wildfires. The Camp Fire, the one in Northern California that set records for being the most destructive and most deadly wildfire in California's history, is now 100% contained. That doesn't mean it's completely out, but that it's been completely surrounded by a fire line that should prevent it from spreading beyond the boundary. Firefighters battled it for more than 2 weeks and finally got some help when rain moved in for a few days. The search for survivors continues, though. The fast-moving blaze killed at least 85 people and around 250 are still missing. 14,000 homes, more than 4,700 businesses and other buildings, and an area of land that's about the size of Chicago have all been lost. There's been a major escalation in the conflict between the nations of Russia and Ukraine, but there are two very different accounts about what actually happened. Here's what we know. It involves Russian and Ukrainian ships near the Kerch Strait. This is a narrow passage of water that connects the Black Sea with the Sea of Azov. Russia and Ukraine have ports in both bodies of water, so the Kerch Strait is important to both countries. But while the Kerch Strait itself is supposed to be shared territorial waters of Russia and Ukraine, Russia controls the land on both sides of it. That includes the Crimean Peninsula, which Russia controversially annexed from Ukraine in 2014. On Sunday, Russia captured 3 Ukrainian ships near the Kerch Strait. Russia says that 3 Ukrainian warships illegally entered Russian waters and conducted dangerous maneuvers there. Ukraine says Russia illegally carried out an act of aggression against its ships, and the Ukrainian government released this video, which appears to show a Russian vessel intentionally ramming a Ukrainian tugboat. Both countries say Russia fired on the Ukrainian ships and that several Ukrainian sailors were injured. Now, the whole region's on edge over this and the fact that Ukraine declared martial law on Monday. That's when a government takes control of many parts of daily life, and it's usually done in wartime. And this is the first time that's happened since conflict began between Ukraine and Russia in 2014. 10-second trivia. In what year did the U.S. experience its highest unemployment rate? 1929, 1933, 1983, or 2009? The U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics says the unemployment rate was about 25% in 1933 during the Great Depression. And during World War II in 1944, that unemployment rate dropped to 1.2%, likely the lowest on record. Right now, it stands at 3.7%. That's the lowest it's been since 1969. Some economists call this a job hunter's market. And whether you're applying for part-time work as the Christmas shopping season heats up, or you're trying to land your dream job with a renowned company, there are a few things you can do to make yourself stand out on paper in all the right ways.
The resume. The dreaded resume, some would say.
It's all about mind games.
I want you to take this resume. This is a real person. We're calling her Jane Doe to protect her privacy. What's the first thing when you're looking at this that you would immediately change and that jumps out at you?
First things first is the 7 seconds. The first 7 seconds when someone is going to read your resume will actually influence their opinion. So if you have all of these different fonts and lines and things happening there, you're just getting too distracted. So like you're going to be pulling in that direction and then this direction and then, oh, change your font again. The location is unnecessary. What I would center all of this information, there should be obviously her name, her phone number, her email, and then a little blurb that basically summarizes you, or Jane in this case, and her career. So the goal of this blurb is for you, in a nutshell, to tell these people why you're such a good fit in a way that you're influencing their behavior. You're not telling them, I'm awesome, I'm an expert. You're leaving the information there for them to jump to that conclusion.
I was taught, do not let your resume go on to a second page. But here we have 2 pages. What do you say?
At Jane's career level and your career level, like if you've been out of college for a few years, you can go with more pages.
What would you say to her to maximize her incredible experience of, wow, what is this, almost 17 years at Cedars-Sinai?
Right here, there's just way too much information, too much going on. You need to be very succinct and to the point. The way our brain internalizes information, you need to tell them what you did, how you did it, and then I recommend you put in a couple of key accomplishments that numerically give the reader an understanding of the scope of what you did.
How do we end it? I usually end it with my education. You're smirking. Why? Is that lame? Is that lame nowadays?
It really is about the experience when someone's reading through your resume. So if you close with education, they'll probably get that, oh, you went to so-and-so school, or, you know, okay, on to the next. However, if you throw in, what we usually do is put in an About Me section, you're going to throw your reader totally off guard. And you're going to tell them something.
Like, what's an example? How far could you go with that?
This woman was applying for a job at Google. And when she was hired, the hiring manager goes to her and says, you know what, you were neck and neck with someone else. But what really kind of was the deciding factor was the fact that you are into roller derby and you play the accordion. Like, that completely sealed the deal for us.
And they only knew that because of her About Me section.
Yeah, because it was completely different.
It's one thing to design an alternatively fueled aircraft, but a plane with no moving parts? Now that's electro-aerodynamic propulsion for you. Engineers at MIT say they've developed and flown an aircraft powered by ionic wind. When energized wires strip negatively charged electrons from the air, ionizing the molecules that move toward negatively charged electrodes at the plane's tail, creating an ionic cloud that creates thrust and allows the plane to fly, or something. Of course, it's a long way from a plane that could carry people places, but if it takes off and propels a lofty idea that errs on the side of caution but still jets off the ground with no moving parts, now that would be ionic. I'm Carl Azuz, landing or crashing puns for CNN 10.